Welcome to another quick baking tutorial for Blender. In this video we'll look at creating some billboard textures using the billboards node in Bake Wrangler. I should say before we begin, this method is really only needed when dealing with layers of transparency and alpha blending. If the object doesn't have any transparent or translucent parts, then we could just use normal baking methods to bake it onto a plane. But the most common billboard textures are going to be of things like, trees that you want in the distance, bushes or grass blades and stuff like that, which pretty much all have some sort of alpha blending involved, and so we'll need to use this different node to capture them. I've just created a simple scene here with a pretty basic tree that we're going to make into a billboard. So the first thing we're going to need to do is create a plane that'll be the billboard. So let's just add a plane to the scene. So the facing of the plane is important, as only things in front of the plane are going to get baked onto it using this method. So we can easily see which way the plane's facing by going into overlays and turning on this face orientation overlay. The blue side of the plane is the forward facing, so we can just use this to make sure that's facing towards the object that we want to bake. When we are rotating the plane, we should make sure to do that in object mode and to not apply any of these rotations, and the reason for that I'll talk about in a minute. So let's just switch to orthographic mode and let's rotate and scale this plane so that it covers the whole object. So we just need to make sure the whole object is enclosed in the volume of the plane. And then we want to make sure that none of the branches or anything are intersecting the plane. If we had it too close like this, then the ones on the back side would not end up in the texture. Okay, so with the plane set up, let's move on to the bake recipe we'll be using. So we want to, instead of using the input mesh, use the billboard input. So let's just add that. So we'll set the target plane as our target here, and then for the source I'm just going to use a collection which I have the tree parts in and attach that to the source. Okay, so at this point there's a few differences when using the billboard input that we should go over. The first thing is that not every bake pass is supported by this node. This is either because the pass doesn't make any sense when we're doing this, or that it would need some kind of specialized implementation to work. An example of this is the normal maps, but there is a specialized pass for them called billboard normals in the PBR group, and this is where the plane's rotations come in. As long as we did all our rotations in object mode and didn't apply them, then the billboard normals pass can read those rotations of the object, and it can try and calculate the surface normals relative to the facing of the billboard. In general, we can use any of the PBR passes just fine, and we also have this billboard normals pass if we need normals, but some of the others won't work correctly in this mode. If there is a pass that you really need to have for your billboard and it doesn't work, just leave a comment about it under this video, and then maybe it'll be added in a future version. The second major difference is that we might need more samples for a pass than what we're used to. So normally a single sample would be fine for any of the PBR passes, but so let's just bake the color pass of this tree using two different sample sets and we can have a look at what difference it makes. So we'll do 1 sample and we'll do 10 samples. So we can see here that the one with 1 sample is slightly worse than the one with more samples, though the difference isn't huge at this resolution, but you can definitely see that the pixel colours are more accurate in the higher sample count. And lastly, we have this alpha bounces setting. This just controls how many times a ray can pass through an object before it will be culled, and having too high a value will slow down the bake a lot, but we need it high enough so that we get all the objects that are behind each other. So let's just have a look at the difference that makes if we use some different settings. We'll have 1 and put this one up to 5, and I'll put the samples back to 1 on each of them. So you can see here the main, it's mostly visible where we've got a lot of leaves at the base of the tree with some vines, and 5 was actually not enough for this tree. We've still got some pixels that are coming up black, but you can see in the one with only 1 bounce we've got huge areas that have come up blank. That's because there's just too many layers of objects here and the ray is getting culled because there's enough bounces. So looks like for this we probably need 6 or 7, so let's put it up to 7 and see if that resolves it. And 7 is still not quite enough for this object. Try 10. Okay, so 10 we're pretty much there. There's still a couple of pixels that aren't coming through quite right, but that's good enough for this example. So let's just go ahead now and we will bake a texture set for this tree and then apply them to the plane. Okay, so we've got our 4 maps. We've got the colour roughness, some normals, and the alpha map. So let's just apply that to plane. We'll just duplicate this one. Turn on alpha blending for this texture, and here we go, we've got a billboard version of the tree. It's really baked at a fairly low quality, but if it was in the distance that would look pretty decent, and we can always bake it at much higher resolution if we need to. You can see the normals are working pretty well, and they're aligned with the plane as the tangent, and it looks pretty good. So that's how we can create a simple billboard, but we're not actually restricted to just baking a plane. We can actually use any shape. The only downside would be that the normal pass probably won't work correctly anymore, since that works using the object's rotation rather than each individual face. But since we don't care about the normals, we could instead, say, bake multiple angles around the tree in one pass, or maybe make some sort of environment texture. So let's just duplicate this scene. remove the planes, and let's instead try with a circle. So I've just added a circle with 6 faces. We'll scale it out so that it fits around the tree, and then let's just extrude these faces up to cover the tree. Again, we've got the overlay to show which faces are set with this face orientation, and the blue ones need to be facing towards the object, which you can see they are. And now we just need to unwrap it so that we can bake to it. You probably do a better unwrap than that, but that'll do for this. So we'll just set the target to that circle, and let's bake the same passes. Okay, so I think these normals are probably wrong, but let's just apply them to the texture anyway and see what we get. And there we go, we've got our tree now facing from multiple different angles. And I think those normals are probably wrong, it's hard to tell. Yeah, I think they're definitely wrong. Oh, actually this is inside out, so let's just flip the normals. Switch into perspective. Not entirely sure if those normals are giving the wrong lighting or not, but anyway, we could do a similar thing to bake an environment. But if we set up some kind of environment, we could just add a cube, for example, and then turn it into a rounded cube by just subdividing it, the subdivide modifier, and then we could use this as our object and we would get an environment map baked to it. So that's all I've got for this video. If you enjoyed, leave a comment on any other tutorials you might like to have or any questions you have on this video, and I might get back to them in another video. Right. Happy blending and wrangling.